Hello and welcome back to my writing channel. Today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different from my past few videos. It is not a writing vlog. Today I'm going to be talking about my bookish preferences with a tag created by Murphy here on YouTube. I will link the video down below from her booktube channel. She created this tag called bookish preferences, and basically it's just lots of questions about the types of books that you like to read, and I'm going to be answering it from mostly my readerly perspective, but a little bit about my writerly perspective as well. Definitely feel free to do this tag if you also have a booktube or an authortube channel, or you can do it on a blog, or you can leave me some of your answers in the comments below, especially if you disagree with me or if you're really like completely on board with whatever I say. Without further ado, let's get to the tag. So the first question is, which perspective is your favorite? I would say of the books that I've read, especially recently, it's probably a fairly even split between first person and third person. I don't necessarily care which POV it is, but I would have to say that I have a slight preference for third person, especially for writing. I've never actually written more than a short story in first person, and it's not really my favorite to read, I'll be honest. I don't have such strong feelings against first person that I will like not read a book because it's in first person. That's never stopped me from reading a book. But if I pick up a book, for example, that I'm really excited about or I'm interested in reading, and I open the first page and I see first person, sometimes there's just a little bit of like, crap. It's not necessarily my favorite. I would have maybe hoped that it was written in third person, but I don't actually care that much. And if we're also going to factor in tense, I definitely prefer past tense. I really do not like present tense books. I will still read them. It's not going to be a reason for me not to read a book if it's in present tense, but I rebel against it. For some reason, I just love it when it's in past tense. Which format is your favorite? For example, hardback, paperback, audio, ebook, etc. Definitely, I have a preference for paperback. I love my paperbacks. It might have something to do with the fact that I like to read in different places, and sometimes I like to take my books with me. I do have some hardbacks, you'll notice, but typically that's just because it's books that I wanted to read when they first came out, so I bought them in hardback because they were only available in hardback. But if I have the option between hardback and paperback, I will always go paper. I also listen to some audiobooks, and I have plenty of ebooks as well, and because of my traveling history, moving abroad several times, I do get ebooks from time to time, and I don't mind them really, but I definitely have a preference for having the physical book. There's something just really special, I think, about being able to hold it in my hands and actually flip the pages. It's one of the only things actually that I'm fairly traditional about. I really do prefer to have a physical book, but I have nothing against ebooks, and they definitely have a very practical and legitimate use for me with, you know, travel being such an important part of my life. Audiobook is a bit the same. I do prefer to read the words on a page because I feel like as a writer, I get more from that experience, but I don't mind an audiobook. Do you prefer a character or a plot-focused book? There is a lot of discussion about character-driven versus plot-driven, and I think a lot of people mix them up a bit. Generally, like, I will give you an example of a recent book that I read that was character-driven, Addie LaRue, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. That one is very character-driven. There are things that happen in the plot, but it's very minimal. If you described that book, you would describe the character and her struggles and what she's kind of working through more than you would describe things that actually happened, as opposed to plot driven, which is most of fantasy, actually, I would say. Definitely the majority of the fantasy that I've read. It does not mean that a plot focused book will have characters that don't have arcs or characters that aren't interesting or don't have a voice. That is not plot driven. You still need characters that have a voice. Just like with character driven, you still need things to be happening in the book. It can't just be the character woke up and then the character went to bed. Like, that's not character driven, in the same way that plot driven is not just all about the things happening and you don't care about or know the people that you're following. That's not at all how it is. So I would say that I am definitely a plot driven person generally. I love fantasy. I love a good world building, atmosphere, and magic systems, mysteries, things to overcome, battles to fight, whether internal or external or both. I love all of that. I really love a good plot-driven book. That doesn't mean that the characters can be shells. They absolutely must be strong voiced characters, but I do get a little bit bored in what I would consider a character-driven book, like Addie LaRue, actually. I was a little bit bored. Good books will have a balance of the two, obviously, but yeah, I lean towards plot-driven. Do you care about prose? I very much do. I've gotten pickier and pickier about my prose, actually, as I've gotten older, to the point where if I feel like the book is a bit bland with its prose and there's nothing special or different or kind of just captivating about the prose itself, even if the story is pretty good, if the prose is just not interesting, I will get bored. So I definitely do notice and care about prose. It makes a big difference. How introspective do you want your characters to be? I really like when you have a strong character voice, and I feel like a strong character voice does come with a certain amount of introspection. I do want to know what's going on with the character. I do want to know why they are noticing the things that they are, why they're doing the things that they are. I want to know all of that stuff, which comes with some introspection. And I'm also a bit of an introspective person, I would say. I like to sit and think and ruminate and, you know, mull over things. At the same time, often super introspective characters tend to be more character-driven stories, and I don't want to spend too long just in thoughts. I do want some action to be happening, so I don't like overly introspective characters. I just really like when some introspection is then met with actions or even shown through actions. I don't really know if I answered that question. I guess how introspective, like medium introspective, not too much, but also not like completely devoid of introspection. I want some. How do you like your relationships? I would say I like a wide variety of different types of relationships. I think ultimately what I really want to see out of any type of relationship is some sort of uniqueness, like something that really marks the friendship as a special type of dynamic. You know, even if it fits into some sort of stereotype, like the quiet one and the talkative one, or, you know, I don't mind these stereotypical balances, but I want it to be the type of dynamic that when it comes up in the page, when you start having this like spar or this interaction, conversation between these like 2 or 3 people, let's say, I want to know what I'm getting into. Like, oh, okay, where's the sassy line from the sassy friend? Or, you know, what's the quiet, you know, introvert who always has something really intelligent to say? What are they gonna throw out there? I'm not really sure if I'm explaining this properly. I really do love platonic friendships with that. I love when you have a balance of, you know, 2 or 3 people who just really balance each other out, or not the same, but have enough commonalities that they have this kind of unlikely friendship. That's probably my favorite. I also like the tropes like enemies to lovers or enemies to friends, or lovers to enemies. These can all be really, really fun tropes. I like it all, really. I would say there's not one type that I don't like. There's just some examples of specific friendships or specific relationships that I don't like, but I can't like paint with a broom about a certain type that I don't like. Generally, from one book to another, I want to read something different, so I like a little bit of everything. Do you like a lot of description? I read a lot of fantasy and I write fantasy, so description is a very important and also often very interesting part of the book. I mean, of the story. You want some description of what things look like and smell like and taste like and sound like. You need that when you have a fantasy world. So yes, I do really like some description. I am not a huge fan of like the Tolkien-esque, you know, long paragraphs and giant chunks of description that you do find in a lot of specifically epic fantasy, but also other types of fantasy and other types of literature as well. I would say I like really poignant description, and that comes back to that prose thing. I don't want to read 10 paragraphs of, you know, kind of bland description that those 10 paragraphs give you an idea. I want to read 4 or 5 sentences about what the place looks and smells like or sounds like, and that be enough for me to create the rest of my head. So I really want strong descriptions, definitely want them to be there, and I don't mind if they're a little bit long depending on the scene, but overall I don't want like paragraphs upon paragraphs. Do you prefer standalones or a series? I would have said series if you'd asked me 5, 6 years ago. I loved a good series. Once I started with characters, I wanted to follow them to the ends of the earth. I wanted to stay with them as long as possible. And that is still definitely the case sometimes. If it's a really interesting world, if it's really interesting characters, I will definitely follow them. But I will say that the majority of the time anymore, I gravitate towards standalones. I think part of this is because I'm writing and because I'm kind of trying to explore the possibilities of what I can write and what's out there and what's selling and what people are interested in. And I think the best way or the most straightforward way to do this is to kind of cherry pick, to you know, buy and read multiple different types of standalones. And so I think I've kind of gravitated towards that type of reading where I meet a character, I enjoy a good story, and then I move on and I want a new world and a new character and a new prose style and all of that. Doesn't mean I don't like series. I do absolutely like series, and there are some, once I read one, if I really just vibe with the characters or even just the author's style of writing, I will happily buy every book in that series and read every single one. I love series still. But as a general rule, I would say I prefer standalones now. Single POV or multiple POV? I'm not sure I have a preference, actually. Maybe I gravitate a little bit more towards single POV, and I've written more single POV in the past. I have very little experience with multi-POV, although that might be about to change. But as far as reading, I've probably read a little bit more single POV than multi-POV, but I've read plenty of multi-POV as well. And if it's done well, which is the key to anything, single POV included, but if it's done well, I really do enjoy a multi-POV. And if each of the, see, this is the problem sometimes, if each of the perspectives is equally interesting or at least interesting enough to make it where I don't want to just skip certain chapters. I have read far too many multi-POV where I just really don't enjoy one of the perspectives. And it gets really frustrating because all I want to do is skip, but I know I can't, because if it's done well, those chapters will be really important to understanding the rest of the chapters. But yeah, that is not fun. Because voice is so important to me, that's one of the advantages of single POV. I can start it, and if I really don't like the voice, I stop. But if I love the voice, then it's going to carry me through the book. But multi-POV is a little bit riskier. The last question is, do you prefer a strong start, middle, or finish? I think we can all agree that a really good book should fulfill all three of these things, but we do have our preferences. A strong start's really important, otherwise it's too easy to put the book down. A strong finish is important because you obviously want all of the effort and the time that you've put with this book to pay off. But actually, I feel like the one that matters the most to me is the middle. I'm not sure how many people would agree with me, but I will explain. It might be because of my writing and because of my writerly background, but I know how hard it is to write a good middle. And I have read more than one book that has had a disastrous middle, one that just kind of gets mushy, where things don't quite make sense, where there are scenes that maybe don't need to be there. Some things are too rushed, some things are too short. It's a very common problem, and as a reader, I'm most likely to DNF a book kind of in the middle. I often am quite patient with books to where if they start off a bit meh, I'll still probably try and read them because I want to read them. I want to see where it's going. And you know, if I do make it through the middle and I get to the end and the end is not quite what I wanted, I'll still probably say, okay, that was, you know, pretty good read because I made it to the end. I wanted to read to the end. So even if the ending is disappointing, I might forgive that easier than a mushy middle. So those are all the questions of the tag. I hope you guys enjoyed this. It was so fun just to kind of talk about books, you know, like this is a writing channel, but it's also a bookish channel, and I kind of like to do like mix in more tags like this along with my writing vlogs and my kind of writing advice and tips and feedback sort of videos. Like I said before, please do feel free to answer some or all of these questions in the comments below, especially if there was a question that stuck out to you, if you really agreed with what I said, or if you absolutely adamantly disagree, you have a completely different opinion, leave it in the comments below. I would love to know. Thanks so much for watching, and I will talk to you very soon in another writing video.